Today is a big day for a big old truck. Today, we are completely transforming the 7.3 Powerstroke. That's right, this is the last time that this thing is gonna look like this and perform like this forever.
6 months ago, I bought this 2001 Ford F350 equipped with the legendary 7.3-liter Powerstroke turbo diesel with only 94,000 miles on it.
Now, the 7.3 here has quite literally been like my business partner. It hasn't let me down, and it's been fantastic, and it's helped progress my YouTube channel quite a bit.
So in today's video, we're giving the F350 quite some loving and fitting it with a bunch of new parts.
We're gonna be fixing a few things that really needed to be fixed, and, well, we're gonna be upgrading those parts, as well as doing a bunch of cosmetic changes to completely update the look of this truck, but not in the ways that most guys do. And I'm just super excited, but we have quite a bit of work to do, so we're jumping right into it. First things first, the truck needs shocks. What I didn't realize was this had an aftermarket dual shock front setup. I believe the kit is from FabTech, looking kind of rough, and I was always curious why I had two shocks up here. Upon some further research, I found out that's a thing that a lot of truck guys do. They either do it for show or they do it for performance. I'm not racing this thing in the desert, and I don't have a plow on it, and I don't intend to. So I'm eliminating the dual shock setup up front. Supposedly it can also make the truck ride rougher if you don't, have a plow or anything, or you're not going, off-roading with it. And this thing as it is right now rides like a freaking bucking horse. But that could be because not only are these front two shocks blown, but back here, hello there, but back here, this one is also blown. So 3 blown shocks definitely aren't helping the way this thing rides. And it's not good to ride with blown shocks, especially in something this freaking heavy, a tank like this. So the truck is getting a nice upgrade first and foremost.
I did tons and tons of research and read countless forums on this truck, and all my studies pointed me to go with Bilstein shocks. Definitely not the cheapest by any means, but I want this truck to ride good and for the shocks to last. So I had no issue forking up the money to get these Bilstein 5100 series shocks.
Now my truck is lifted. I believe it's a 6-inch lift kit. That's at least what the previous owner told me it was. So I needed to order special Bilstein shocks. I'll include part numbers and a link to those shocks, the exact shocks that I used, down in the description below.
Now it's time to start pulling the 35s off and start removing the old shocks. But unfortunately, in this case, it's just not as easy as that.
All right, so truck is in the air, tires are off. Here comes our little issue. When you look at this, yeah, it's not that complex what they put on here to run a dual shock setup. But the problem comes when I go to switch to a single shock setup. You'll notice behind there, I don't know if you guys can see, there's no factory shock mount for a single shock. Shock mounts down there, that's the factory piece, I believe. It's supposed to come up and mount in the middle here, but there's this thing. So I believe they removed the factory front shock mount, the upper shock mount, in order to put this whole shebang on here. Now, lucky enough, I was able to find someone who was parting out a 2001 7.3 F350, and I bought these factory upper shock mounts. You can see the little Ford emblem on there with all the hardware because I needed it. I only paid, I think I paid $50 for these. Had to take a short little drive to go get them. So instead of just pulling the old shocks out and putting new ones in, we got to pull the old shocks out, pull the FabTech dual front shock mounts out, put the new factory shock mount in, and then put in the new shocks. So that's why it's not that easy. So I've been spraying all the hardware that goes in here for a few days now, actually, so that I hope it comes out easy enough. But that's what we're going to do now. We're going to pull the old shocks out and remove all that FabTech dual shock gear that's in there.
Despite days of pre-soaking the bolts with PB Blaster, none of the mounting bolts for any of the FabTech hardware wanted to come out, and I knew I was in for a long day of work already, so I decided to save some time and cut the mounts and old shocks out. And then, in the blink of an eye, my day-long project turned into a much, much longer one.
Well, the worst possible scenario just happened. I was hitting this bolt to slide it out, and the lower mount broke. The lower mount that was in fine condition, didn't need to be replaced, is now snapped off. So now I get to remove these U-bolts, pull this thing out. Well, that sucks. So now I have to try to locate one of those things, hope someone on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist has a truck that they're parting out, but unfortunately most of them are going to be that you have to go pull the parts yourself. So while I wait to see if any of these people answer me that have the trucks that they're parting out, I'm gonna pull apart the other side and hope it goes smoother. Gosh.
Fortunately, it did. I cut the dual shock setup out, scuffed up the new mounts, and hit them with a quick coat of paint. Then installed them onto the frame. Eventually, I'll completely grind down the old shock mount setup, as well as paint this whole wheel well area, but for the time being, and knowing how much work I still had to do to get the truck moving again, I decided that'd be for another video. While waiting for hardware to arrive, my dad and I began grinding wheel studs down in preparation for the next little mod, billet aluminum Bora wheel spacers.
I like crayon.
That's on flush.
Yep, perfect. I am pooped. It has been a long day, but here's where we're at so far. I have not been able to locate yet bottom shock mount for this side. I've got a few messages out on Facebook Marketplace. There's supposedly someone that I was messaging 45 minutes away that's pulling one off tonight, and I'm gonna go get it tonight. But for some reason, I don't think he's actually going to. Fingers crossed that he is.
2 hours later.
Well, it's the evening. We're heading down to just outside Boston now to pick up the shock mount that I need. To just think, none of this would be happening if I didn't hit that bolt and shear the shock mount. I still don't understand how that sheared the shock mount, but regardless, it happened, and now I'm paying dearly for it with 2 hours of my time and 50 of my hard-earned doll hairs. All right, we're home and package secured. I just have to figure out how to get this rusted shock off. I didn't need that part. Welcome to day 2, and riddle me this. 5 minutes ago, it was pouring rain, and in the pouring rain, I'm still soaked. In the rain, I set up this little dinky thing to protect the little corners that I'm working on from the wet, so I could keep working. And now, sure enough, the sun's out. Here I am testing and showing my perseverance by coming out here in the pouring rain and setting up my little tent here so I can continue to work through the rain, work through the storm, weather the storm, and the rain stops. Right after I finish getting this dinky little thing set up. Anyways, late last night, I got home with the new lower shock mount. Unfortunately, he left the old shock attached, so now I have the pleasure of trying to remove that bolt, which I know is not going to come off. And then we also had to run to the store this morning. We took the lovely little GTI to other side. There's the old shock mount. I needed that for size reference, but went to Home Depot and got ourselves a bag of bolts. So we have all new hardware here now for the bottom. I believe it's the bottom that we needed. The bottom of the shocks, because the ones that I bought, the top shock mounts actually came with the hardware we needed, I believe. So what we're gonna do now is get the passenger side buttoned up because that side's already mostly done. We're gonna put the new shock in, and then we'll fight with the new shock mount that I got lower for the driver's side and work on getting that side sorted. But on that side, of course, the driver's side, we still have to put back on the U-bolts, put on the new mount, and reattach the, I believe that would be the steering stabilizer shock, and then we can put the new shock in and go from there.
Turns out that bolt was quite the tough cookie, even for Mr. Sawzall and his friend El Grinding Wheel. But eventually I reigned victorious and began the installation of the lower shock mount and the U-bolts holding it. then prepped to start installing the new shock, where I discovered the bolts I'd just gotten somehow didn't fit. So another trip to the parts store was in store for me, but I finally had the first shock in, only a mere 30-something hours after we started. The passenger side played much nicer than the driver's side, and installation of the second shock was a breeze. Things were going well. Until it started to downpour again, of course. Regardless, we weathered the storm, and with the rear tires off, we could start pulling out the rear shocks. And started installing the new Bilsteins, which proved rather difficult until my genius decided to make more room for my lanky figure and awkwardly shaped head by removing the spare tire. With that all out of the way, the rear shocks went in decently easy. With all 4 shiny new shocks installed at each corner, we could begin prepping to install our custom wheel spacers from Bora to fit our new 2017 King Ranch wheels. And how we got those King Ranch wheels is an interesting story.
All right, so yesterday we made a ton of progress on the F350. It was such a crappy day outside with the weather that I just needed to make some headway so that the truck wasn't sitting like this, incapacitated, for much longer. But here's where we're at right now. First things first, the shocks are sorted out in the front here. Now, if you guys remember, when I put them in, you could tell this bottom boot was all scrunchy, was all messed up, and it looked like crap. And at the time, I actually thought that I might have gotten sent the wrong shocks, because in reality, there's only about that much of shock travel. But the bump stop back here is less than that. So that's the important thing. You want your bump stop to hit, of course, before your shock bottoms out. That's how you blow a shock. And just to double check that to make sure before I tightened that all up, my neighbor Steve, who's a mechanic, came by and I had him check it over to make sure that was okay. So the shocks are all bolted in on the front, torqued down, ready to go. So the rears, they're perfect length, they match up perfectly, and they're all torqued down as well. So only 3 days later, after initially starting the shock project, that portion's complete. And that was supposed to be the most, that's not even like an upgrade. That was merely just replacing the broken ones and giving it a little bit of an upgrade. But now comes the upgrades.
In the dark of the early morning, I began my 150-mile quest to buy some 20-inch wheels off a 2017 F350 King Ranch.
Yes, Roger Williams University. A few of my friends went there in college, so I of course went and visited them and made an ass of myself. Good times. Great times. Not even 7 a.m. and the package is secured. I can't really see because I'm trying to drive, but look at these things. Man, oh man. These things are gonna look so cool on the F350. Would you shut? It's not a person in the seat, it's a rim. It's a wheel. Would you relax? Anyways, I am hyper excited to get these on the F350. I don't know when they're gonna go on.
In just a short 6 months after bringing home those new wheels, I was finally taking them to the tire shop to get wrapped in new rubber.
Now, if you really wanted, you could, theoretically, and from what I read on forums, you could just throw on those wheels and run them like that. But then your truck will look like one of those ones that they use on the railroad with the tires way in, because the problem is, on what is it, 2000, I don't know if it's 2003, 2004, or 2005, they made the axles wider, and they kept that width all the way till I believe now. So therefore these wheels have a different offset, and these trucks have narrower axles. So if you put those on, the tires just, they sit really, really far in. And from what I've read, it looks really funny. And depending what size tire you run, you could rub on your leaf springs. So in order to make your truck look normal and to be able to run those newer hubcaps, you're gonna wanna use a spacer. Now a wheel spacer is really not one of those parts that you wanna cheap out on by any means, especially on a heavy duty truck that tows things. Wheel spacers are just one of those things. You Don't cheap out on them. Unless, of course, you want to send Kia Souls to the moon. So after a plethora of research and reading through forums, the spacers that I went with are Bora, or Bulletproof Off-Road Adapters. That name should tell you something right off the bat. They're built in the good old US of A with Haas CNC machines, which I know nothing about CNC machines, but that sounds like pretty good stuff. They're built with US Alcoa 606 T16 billet aluminum, and these spacers have a lifetime warranty. I don't think there's another spacer that has a warranty, never mind a lifetime one. Now, hub-centric is a very, very important word regarding wheel spacers, especially, again, on a massive truck like this. Hub-centric spacers bolt to the hub, just like they say. The spacer comes like this. These are the original studs with the truck. When you get the spacer, you get new lug nuts, you put those on, and you torque these down to the same torque value that your wheel would be. So now this spacer is torqued to the truck with the exact same torque value as your wheel, meaning these are incredibly strong and they're not going anywhere. Now, the new studs coming off of your spacer, which are now your wheel studs, can come in a thread pattern that you specify. So in my case, a few weeks after actually getting my King Ranch wheels, I wanted to add a little more King Ranch flair to my Powerstroke, and I got King Ranch hubcaps for the same year that the wheels are, because my wheels didn't come with hubcaps. So on Facebook Marketplace for, I think it was 50 bucks, I found 4 King Ranch hubcaps. They've got that nice little subtle King Ranch emblem on there, and just adds a little King Ranch flair again to the truck. But in order to utilize those hubcaps, which have these special clips in here, you need to use the lug nuts off of that year truck, which is like a 2017 to 2019, I believe. So I'll link these down below on Amazon, but I got all new lug nuts. So that meant when ordering my wheel spacers, I had to specify that I wanted these studs to be the thread pitch off a 2017 truck, which is the year that those wheels are. So I ordered all new lug nuts, which have this special clip thing so that I can put those hubcaps, I can clip them onto these studs. And Bora installed these 2017 or whatever threaded lug nuts. So they go on like that. Well, I can't remember if I mentioned this already or not, but it's a 2-inch spacer that I'm running, and that's what most people run when they're running these newer style wheels. A 2-inch spacer, I'll show you guys the fitment when I put the wheels and tires on, but a 2-inch spacer is supposed to bring it just out to about OEM on a 2000 and whatever when they went to the wider axles. The 2-inch spacer is supposed to bring it out to that width, so it looks correct. It's not supposed to kick the tires out. I didn't want that. I'm already running a pretty decent sized spacer as it is. I don't want to kick the tires out even more. Which hub-centric wheel spacers are actually what's on my Corvette, which, while it may not be towing, it still gets its fair share of abuse that could break down a wheel spacer. So I will include a link to these Bora wheel spacers down in the description below for you guys to check out. These are the spacers I'm going to be running on the back of my Vet. And shout out to Lenny and the guys at Bora for being so good to work with and for supporting the F350 build. So all 4 of the spacers are torqued down to their spec, which is 160 or 165 foot-pounds for this truck. And you guys will have seen from the time lapse, I did grind down these factory studs just a tiny, tiny bit. In reality, in the back, it doesn't look like I even had to, but you need this spacer to sit flush against the hub. See how good that sits on there? And then you need your wheel to sit flush on here. So you can't be having these studs stick out, which would cause the wheel to not sit flush on here. And that's how you would lose a wheel. And then everyone's like, oh, it's a spacer. No, you got to make sure you do your prep work. So I ground down all the studs a tiny, tiny bit. In the front, someone on a forum, I believe, said 1/8 of an inch. I just ground down a tiny bit. And in my application too, I did use a little bit of emery cloth to, you're not gonna be able to see it now, but I used a little bit of emery cloth to make sure there was no debris or crap or built up rust that would cause the spacer to not sit flush down against the hub. But I double checked everything and these are all good to go, meaning that we're finally ready to bolt up the wheels and tires. Yes, ignore the back where I put one on last night because I was really excited, but it's not all tightened down yet, so let's get the rest on and see how this thing friggin' looks. 165 foot-pounds on, let's see, math has never been my strong suit, but that would be 300 lug nuts. I'm just kidding. I'm sure some of you think I'm serious. All the lug nuts are tightened just in time for the rain to begin. Go figure. Again, this whole entire week. But it's time for the finishing touch for the wheels. Anyways, I am dripping sweat. Here it goes. The beautiful King Ranch hubcap. These things really go on there. Oh my God. Guys, look at this thing. Oh my God. Of course, it's another day because, of course, right after putting on the new wheels and tires and getting the final hubcap on, smacked on there, it started to rain again. So I was just getting ready to show you guys what the truck looked like, but then again, it wasn't finished because today we still have one last upgrade modification to do that I'm actually pretty excited about. So now that we have those nice, fresh, new, tall all-terrains ready to spew dirt and debris all over my beautiful paint and whatever I'm hauling behind the truck, so to keep that from happening, we're gonna throw some mud flaps on this thing, but not just any regular old mud flaps. These are custom-made Duraflap mud flaps, also like the Bora wheel spacers, made right here in the good old US of A. They're made of a 3/8 inch polyethylene rubber blend. I did a good job pronouncing that one, didn't I? Just took me one time. And they're just plain strong. Everyone on the Powerstroke forums recommended these things. They're built not to tear, break, rust, rip, fade, peel, and the best part, second best part to the fact that they're made in the US, they're drillless. So I don't have to be drilling holes in this thing because I really don't want to do that. And not only do these things kind of help protect the truck and whatever I'm towing it away, I think they look just plain cool. And half the reason I got them was for the look. So I went with the 304 mirror finish stainless steel polished weights to add to the new shiny theme I've got going on here.
The nice thing about buying products from an American-made company is they make instructions that you can actually understand. So thankfully the Duraflap mud flaps came with nice and easy to read instructions that made this installation a breeze. Shout out to Myron and the whole Duraflap team for being so great to work with and for hooking me up with these mud flaps. Of course, I'll put a link to the flaps I used down in the description below.
Now look at this, Dad. Wow. So here's the thing, and you guys are really gonna hate me for it. We're driving the truck now. It's done, it's complete. But unfortunately, I can't show you guys yet because the way that I did this video, well, I started installing parts for the part 2 of this video before I got after shots of all the stuff I did in this video. So I can't show you guys the truck right now because it has some of the parts that I was gonna install in part 2 on it, and I can't spoil that. So I don't mean to snake you guys like this. I really didn't plan it like this. I was just so excited to get all the parts on, and they were all, you know, at my house ready to be put on, and just the editing took too long. I put on the parts too quick, and so here we are. But I promise, part 2 of this build will be live in 2 days. 2 days, and it'll be up, and you guys will be able to watch that video and see what the truck finally looks like. And let me tell you, it looks incredible. It is my dream truck now. Not to blow wind up my own skirt, but I could not have done a better job with the parts that I picked and the color scheme. It just, everything, this thing looks phenomenal. So stay tuned. 2 days, that video will be live. Unless you're watching this in 2 years from now, then I'll include a link for the new video, the part 2 video. So sorry it ended up like this, but I will see you guys in that video. Please don't hate me too much. Happy motoring.